The massive holographic display in the Galactic Council's command center flickered red as another star system vanished from the map. Admiral Kale's 6 eyes tracked the crimson dots spreading across their territory like a deadly infection. Each dot represented billions of lives lost to the Vexcar war machine. "Fleet 7 has gone silent, sir," whispered his aide, a blue-skinned Zilonian whose tentacles shook with barely contained terror. The creature's voice cracked as he continued. "That's 3 entire battle groups in the last hour. The Vexcar are moving faster than our evacuation ships." Around the war room, representatives from dozens of species huddled over their individual command stations. The proud crystalline empire's ambassador, a being made of living diamond, dimmed visibly as reports flooded in from his homeworld's defense grid. The insectoid hive queen's mandibles clicked frantically as she coordinated with her warrior drones across 17 systems. Kyle's primary eyes focused on the tactical display, while his secondary pair scanned intelligence reports. The Vexcar Empire had emerged from the galactic rim 6 months ago with technology that defied understanding. Their ships phased through energy shields like they weren't there. Their weapons turned entire planets to glass in minutes. Worst of all, they seemed to know every council battle tactic before it was even deployed. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Arcturus defense grid," called out Lieutenant Vex, a young officer whose purple skin had turned pale with stress. "They're requesting immediate evacuation. The Vexcar fleet is 3 hours out." "Tell them to hold position," Kyle ordered, though his heart sank. Arcturus housed 40 billion souls across its orbital cities. There weren't enough ships in the galaxy to evacuate them all. The war room's main screen shifted to show real-time footage from the front lines. Massive council dreadnoughts, each the size of a small moon, fired torrents of plasma into the void. Their quantum missiles exploded in brilliant flashes against Vexcar hull plating. But the enemy ships kept coming, their dark hulls absorbing energy that should have vaporized entire fleets. "How are they doing this?" muttered Commander Thex, the reptilian tactical specialist whose scales had turned a sickly green. "Our weapons worked perfectly in the simulations. The plasma should be cutting through their armor like paper." "Maybe their armor isn't the problem," Kyle said quietly, his mind racing through possibilities. "Maybe we're fighting the wrong war entirely." His aide looked up from a datapad, confusion written across his alien features. "Sir, I don't understand. This is total warfare. We're throwing everything at them." "Everything modern," Kyle corrected. He turned to his command console and began accessing the deepest archives of Council military history. Files from the early expansion period, when species first made contact and shared their knowledge. Most of it was obsolete now, replaced by advanced energy weapons and quantum shields. But there, buried beneath centuries of technological progress, he found something interesting. A species that had refused the Council's generous offer of advanced weaponry. A young race that preferred their primitive kinetic weapons to elegant plasma rifles. "Humans," he whispered, reading the file with growing fascination. The report was brief but telling. When the Council first encountered humanity, they'd been impressed by the species' rapid expansion across their local star cluster. But their military technology was laughably primitive. Metal projectiles fired by chemical explosives, nuclear weapons instead of antimatter bombs, ships that relied on simple fusion drives rather than quantum tunneling engines. The Council had offered to upgrade their entire military infrastructure. Most human colonies had eagerly accepted, transforming their fleets and armies to match galactic standards. But some settlements had politely declined, claiming they preferred their traditional methods. "Traditional methods," Kyle repeated, his mind spinning. The Council's advanced sensors, energy weapons, and quantum shields were all designed to counter similar technology. But what happened when you faced an enemy using completely different principles? "Sir?" his aide asked nervously. "You've been staring at that file for several minutes." Kyle looked up to see the entire war room watching him. The tactical display showed 3 more systems going dark as the Vexcar advance continued. Time was running out. "Send an emergency beacon to all human settlement worlds," he ordered suddenly. "Every colony that refused our technological upgrades. Tell them the Galactic Council formally requests military assistance." The war room fell silent. Even the background hum of computers seemed to pause. "Sir," his aide stammered. "The humans who rejected our technology are essentially Stone Age fighters compared to the Vexcar. Their weapons are centuries behind our current standards. They'll be massacred." Kyle turned back to the tactical display, where another red dot marked the fall of the Centauri defense platform. Millions more lives snuffed out in an instant. "Lieutenant," he said grimly, "we're already being massacred. Our most advanced weapons, our most sophisticated tactics, our most powerful shields, none of it matters against an enemy we don't understand. Maybe it's time to try something they won't understand either." His aide's tentacles writhed with anxiety. "But, sir, kinetic weapons against Vexcar technology, it's suicide." "No," Kyle replied, watching the red tide spread across the galaxy map. "This is suicide. What I'm proposing might just be our salvation." The twin sons of New Sol cast long shadows across the farming settlement as Colonel Han worked on his porch. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, disassembling the bolt-action rifle that had served 3 generations of his family. The weapon was older than most starships in the galaxy, yet every component still functioned perfectly. The peaceful evening shattered when the emergency beacon screamed across every communication device in the settlement. Han's wife rushed outside, her face pale as she clutched their old radio receiver. The Galactic Council's desperate message echoed through the quiet farming community, painting a picture of total galactic warfare and imminent extinction. "The Vexcar Empire has broken through all our defenses," the transmission continued. "We are requesting immediate military assistance from all human colonies. Repeat, this is a code black emergency." Han set down his cleaning cloth and listened carefully as the message detailed the Council's losses. Entire star systems wiped out. Billions of lives lost. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy reduced to running and hiding. Down the dirt. Road porch lights flickered on as other residents emerged to hear the broadcast. Han recognized most of them. Veterans like himself who'd chosen the quiet farming life after their military service ended. Men and women who'd fought in humanity's early expansion wars before the Council offered them fancy energy weapons and quantum armor. Lee appeared first, limping slightly from an old wound he'd earned on the mining world of Kepler 7. The thin man carried his sniper rifle casually, the same weapon he'd used to pick off pirate leaders from impossible distances. Behind him came Park, his prosthetic left arm gleaming in the evening light. The big man had lost his original arm in the Titan Wars, but claimed his mechanical replacement was actually better for handling heavy weapons. "Did you hear that?" Park called out, his artificial fingers flexing experimentally. "The whole galaxy's getting hammered by these Vexcar things, and they want us old-timers to save them." Young Kim jogged up the road, barely breathing hard despite covering half a mile at full sprint. At 50, he was practically a child compared to most of the settlement's veterans, but his eyes held the same sharp focus Han remembered from their service days. Kim had earned his reputation in the asteroid mining conflicts, where pirates with stolen military equipment had terrorized civilian operations. "Colonel, you think this is for real?" Kim asked, checking his sidearm out of habit. "I mean, the Council's got ships that can crack planets in half. What could we possibly do that they can't?" Han stood slowly, his joints protesting after hours. Sitting, he shouldered his rifle and looked at the growing crowd of veterans gathering in the settlement's main square. These weren't the polished soldiers who served on Council dreadnoughts. They were farmers and mechanics and shopkeepers who happened to be some of the deadliest fighters humanity had ever produced. "Park's right about one thing," Han said loud enough for everyone to hear. "They want us to fight energy shields with bullet weapons. Sounds pretty stupid when you put it like that." A few people chuckled, but the laughter died quickly as another emergency broadcast crackled through the speakers. This time it was raw footage from the war zone. Massive Council. Warships firing streams of plasma that could melt mountains. Quantum missiles that bent space-time itself. All of it bouncing harmlessly off sleek Vexcar hulls. "Look at that," whispered old Cho, a former explosives expert whose hands still bore scars from his demolition work. "Their fancy weapons aren't doing anything. Those enemy ships are just eating the energy and asking for more." Park flexed his prosthetic arm again, servos whirring softly. "You know what I learned in the Titan Wars? Sometimes the newest isn't the best. Those pirates had stolen Council plasma rifles, top-of-the-line stuff. But when their power cells died, they were helpless. Me? I just kept shooting. Lee nodded slowly, his sniper's eyes focused on something beyond the horizon. Remember the siege of Outpost Charlie? The Separatists had energy shields protecting their whole compound. Command wanted to call in orbital bombardment, use quantum. Torpedoes to crack their defenses. But you had a better idea, Kim said, grinning as he remembered the story. Took me 3 days, Lee continued, but I found a drainage pipe that led right under their shield generators. One rifle shot through, a maintenance hatch, and their whole defense grid went dark. Sometimes you don't need to go through the front door. Han watched his neighbors and old comrades, discussing tactics with the casual expertise of career soldiers. These people had fought pirates and rebels and separatists across dozens of worlds. They'd won battles with surplus equipment and improvised weapons while the enemy had military-grade hardware. More importantly, they'd won those battles by thinking differently. While Council forces followed established doctrine and relied on technological superiority, humans had learned to adapt, improvise, and exploit weaknesses their enemies never expected. The Council's been fighting these Vexcar for months, with the same tactics that work against other Council species, Han said thoughtfully. Energy weapons against energy shields, quantum technology against quantum defenses. But what happens when you use something completely different? Park's mechanical fingers curled into a fist. These aliens don't know much about humans, do they? They think primitive means weak. They've never seen what happens when you corner a bunch of stubborn humans with nothing left to lose. Within the hour, volunteers began registering at the settlement's communication center. 200 veterans from New Seoul and the surrounding farming communities. No powered armor or plasma cannons in sight. Just soldiers who'd learned that the best weapon was often the one your enemy never saw coming. The spirit of Busan emerged from hyperspace like a ghost from humanity's industrial past. Where Council warships gleamed with polished metal and energy conduits, the human vessel looked like it had been welded together in someone's backyard. Patches of different colored hull plating told the story of countless repairs. Scorch marks from old battles decorated its sides like battle scars. Admiral Kale's bridge crew fell silent as they studied the approaching ship. The vessel's design made no sense by galactic standards. No sleek curves to deflect energy weapons. No glowing shield generators humming with power. Just thick, angular plates of basic steel armor that belonged in a museum. Sir, I'm reading their ship specifications. Now, reported Lieutenant Vex, his purple skin pale with disbelief. This can't be right. They're showing 0 energy shielding, 0 plasma weapon signatures, and their main drive is that a fusion torch? Kyle leaned forward in his command chair, studying the primitive human vessel through the main view screen. Around them, the Council's remaining fleet stretched across space like a constellation of technological marvels. Crystalline ships that bent light around their hulls, insectoid bio-vessels that grew their own weapons, energy beings piloting craft made of pure force fields, and then there was the human ship, looking like a flying scrapyard among works of art. "They're launching dropships, sir," called out the sensor operator, a many-eyed creature whose species had evolved specifically for tracking multiple targets. 12 small craft, no escort fighters. The tactical display lit up with new contacts as the human landing craft separated from their mother ship. If the spirit of Busan looked primitive, these smaller vessels were positively ancient, boxy, utilitarian designs with actual rocket engines spewing chemical exhaust. No anti-grav generators, no quantum displacement drives, just simple thrust pushing them toward the planet below. "Those things look like cargo containers with engines strapped on," muttered Commander Thex, the reptilian tactical officer, whose scales had been a sickly green for days. "How do they even maintain atmospheric flight without repulsors?" Through the view screen, they watched the human dropships begin their descent toward the war-torn planet of Zerion Prime. The world's surface glowed with the fires of battle as Vexcar ground forces systematically destroyed the remaining Council outposts. Massive energy shields protected the enemy positions, while their hover tanks swept across the landscape like metal locusts. The Vexcar orbital fleet barely reacted to the approaching human craft. Their sensors, designed to track energy signatures and quantum disturbances, registered the primitive ships as little more than space debris. A few enemy destroyers adjusted their positions slightly, but mostly they ignored the newcomers entirely. "Incoming transmission from the lead human vessel," announced the communications officer, a jellyfish-like being whose translator implants struggled with human vocal patterns. Colonel Han's weathered face appeared on the main screen, his image slightly fuzzy due to the human's outdated communication equipment. Behind him, Kale could see the interior of the dropship. No holographic displays or quantum computers, just analog gauges and physical switches that looked centuries old. "Council Command. This is Human Strike Team Leader," Han said, his voice calm despite the chaos visible through his craft's small windows. "We're beginning our attack run on Vexcar positions. Estimate contact in 15 minutes. Kyle shot forward in his chair. "Colonel, you need to wait for our orbital bombardment to soften their defenses. Those energy shields will stop anything you can throw at them." Han's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A look Kyle had seen before, though he couldn't quite place where. "Appreciate the concern, Admiral, but we've got our own approach to this problem. Human strike team out." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the Council bridge in stunned silence. Through the tactical display, they watched the human dropships continue their descent towards certain destruction. "Arrogant primitives," Kyle's aide muttered, his tentacles writhing with frustration. "They're flying straight into a death trap. Those Vexcar shields have stopped our most powerful quantum torpedoes. What do they think their ancient projectile weapons will accomplish?" But as Kyle stared at the human ships diving toward the planet's surface, something nagged at his memory. That look in Colonel Han's eyes, the quiet confidence in his voice, it reminded him of someone, his grandfather, Kyle realized suddenly. The old warrior who'd fought in the last great Galactic War, back when battles were won through cunning and determination rather than technological superiority. "Sir, the Vexacar ground commanders are requesting orbital support," reported the communications officer. "They're asking if they should be concerned about the human landing craft." The response came back within seconds, transmitted on open channels for everyone to hear. The Vexcar field commander's voice carried the arrogant dismissal of a superior, addressing an insect. "Negative on orbital support. These primitives pose no threat to our operations. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields, and their craft appear to be unarmed transport vessels. Continue with primary mission objectives." Kyle watched the human dropships disappear into the planet's atmosphere, their crude heat shields glowing cherry red from atmospheric friction. No stealth systems to hide their approach, no jamming fields to confuse enemy sensors. Just 12 flying boxes full of elderly humans carrying weapons that predated most galactic civilizations. Around the bridge, his crew exchanged worried glances. The humans were about to face an enemy that had crushed the most advanced military forces in the galaxy. Logic said they would be annihilated within minutes of landing, but something in Colonel Han's eyes suggested logic might not apply here. The old human had looked at the impossible odds with the expression of someone who'd seen impossible odds before and found a way to beat them. "All ships, maintain orbital position," Kyle ordered quietly, "and keep our sensors focused on the landing zone. I have a feeling we're about to see something interesting." The Vexcar energy shields painted the battlefield in brilliant blue light as another wave of Council plasma fire struck their defensive perimeter. General Thex watched from his command bunker as the advanced alien weapons splashed harmlessly against his force barriers, their quantum-enhanced energy dissipating into harmless light shows. "Sir, the Council fleet is preparing another bombardment run," reported his tactical officer, a tall grey creature whose cybernetic implants glowed softly in the bunker's dim light. "Shall we return fire?" Thex waved a dismissive hand, his attention focused on the holographic display showing his ground forces systematically destroying the last Council strongholds on Xerion Prime. "Let them waste their ammunition. Our shields can absorb anything they throw at us. Focus on eliminating the remaining ground resistance." The massive Vexcar war machines prowled across the planet's surface like mechanical predators. Each hover tank carried enough firepower to level a city block, their energy cannons carving through reinforced bunkers with surgical precision. Above them, the force shields created an impenetrable dome of protection that had turned every council weapon into an expensive light show. "General, we're detecting some small craft that landed about 30 kilometers from our perimeter," the sensor operator called out, his voice bored. "Primitive design, likely cargo shuttles. Should we dispatch a patrol?" Thex glanced at the tactical display where 12 tiny red dots marked the human landing sites. The craft showed no energy signatures, no weapon systems, no threat indicators whatsoever. "Primitive kinetic weapons," he scoffed, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "How quaint. The Council must be truly desperate to send museum pieces against us. Ignore them unless they actually do something worth our attention." But the humans had already vanished. While Thex dismissed them as irrelevant, Colonel Han's teams had scattered into the planet's harsh landscape like seeds in the wind. The rocky terrain of Zerion Prime offered countless hiding spots that the Vexcar sensors couldn't penetrate. Caves carved by ancient rivers, ravines split by geological upheaval, and canyons that twisted through the planet's crust like a maze. Lee found his position first, a rocky outcrop 3 kilometers from the Tei. Nearest Vexcar patrol. The old sniper moved with the patience of a hunter, settling into a shallow depression that made him invisible from below. His rifle was older than most starships, a bolt-action weapon that his grandfather had carried in humanity's first interstellar conflicts. Through his scope, Lee studied the Vexcar soldiers patrolling the perimeter. Their armor gleamed with energy fields and sensor arrays, designed to detect and deflect the advanced weapons used by galactic militaries. But Lee wasn't looking at their armor. He was studying their movement patterns, their blind spots, the small gaps where neck met helmet. The rifle spoke once, a sharp crack that echoed off the canyon walls. 3 kilometers away, a Vexcar officer's head snapped back as the metal bullet punched through the weak joint in his armor. Purple blood sprayed across his troops as the body crumpled to the ground. "Contact! We're under attack!" screamed the surviving soldiers, their energy weapons swiveling wildly as they searched for threats their scanners couldn't detect. General Thex spun toward his sensor operator, his calm composure cracking. "Where did that shot come from? I want targeting data now." "Sir, we're not detecting any energy signatures, no plasma discharge, no quantum disturbance. It's like the shot came from nowhere. The answer came from below, where Park's demolition team had spent the last hour crawling through maintenance tunnels that honeycombed the planet's crust." The big man with the prosthetic arm had studied the Vexcar positions from underground, marking the exact locations where their heaviest vehicles sat on the surface. Park's mechanical fingers worked with inhuman precision as he placed charges along critical support beams in the tunnel system. Not the advanced quantum explosives used by Council forces, but simple chemical compounds that burned hot and fast. The kind of explosives that miners had used for centuries to blast through solid rock. The ground beneath a Vexcar supertank suddenly gave way as 50 tons of stone collapsed into the void below. The massive war machine tilted sideways and crashed into the cavern, its energy shields useless against the planet itself. "How are they doing this?" Thex roared as more reports flooded in. "Our sensors show nothing. Where are these attacks coming from?" Kim's squad provided part of the answer by doing something the Vexcar hadn't seen in centuries of warfare. They maintained complete radio silence. While every galactic military relied on constant communication through quantum channels and encrypted networks, the humans used hand signals that predated spaceflight. Kim raised his fist, and his team froze in place. 2 fingers pointed left, and half the squad melted into the shadows of a rocky outcrop. A subtle gesture with his thumb, and the rest began flanking around the Vexcar patrol from the opposite direction. The enemy soldiers, trained to intercept and decode battlefield communications, found nothing but silence. Their sophisticated listening equipment designed to track quantum transmissions and energy bursts registered no activity at all. To their sensors, the battlefield remained empty, even as humans moved through it like ghosts. When Kim's team struck, they did so from 3 directions simultaneously. Their bullets found the gaps in Vexcar armor, the weak points where flexible joints met rigid plates. The enemy had trained to fight opponents with energy shields and plasma weapons, but they had no defense against adversaries who aimed for their ankles, their elbows, the soft spots that advanced armor couldn't fully protect. "Sir, we're losing." "Contact with patrol groups across the entire perimeter," reported the communications officer, his voice tight with growing panic. "They're calling for support, then going dark. We can't locate the attackers." General Thek stared at his tactical display as red warning indicators spread across the map like a virus. His forces were taking casualties from an enemy they couldn't track, couldn't understand. Every doctrine, every tactical manual, every strategic protocol assumed opponents would fight using recognizable technology and standard battlefield communications. But the humans fought like something. From the galaxy's primitive past, using terrain as a weapon and silence as camouflage, they struck from impossible angles, vanished before reinforcements could arrive, and turned the planet itself into their ally. For the first time since the invasion began, General Thex felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of galactic conquest, uncertainty. The morning sun cast long shadows across the battlefield as Colonel Han walked through the wreckage of what had been the most feared military force in the galaxy. Twisted metal from Vexcar war machines lay scattered across the rocky ground like the bones of mechanical giants. Smoke still rose from the crater where General Thex's command bunker had collapsed, brought down not by quantum weapons or plasma bombardment, but by old-fashioned explosives placed in exactly the right spots. Han's ancient rifle hung casually across his back, its wooden stock worn smooth by 3 generations of hands. Around him, his soldiers moved with the unhurried efficiency of professionals finishing a job. They secured Vexcar prisoners using simple plastic zip ties that cost less than a council soldier's daily rations, while the defeated aliens stared in bewilderment at their captors. The Vexcar survivors couldn't understand what had happened. Their energy shields had remained intact throughout the battle. Their sensors had functioned perfectly. Their weapons had operated exactly as designed. Yet somehow, 200 humans with primitive equipment had dismantled a force of 2,000. Elite warriors in less than 3 hours. Park emerged from the ruins of a hover tank, his prosthetic arm sparking slightly from the morning's work. He carried a Vexcar plasma rifle in his mechanical hand, examining it with the critical eye of someone who understood weapons. "Colonel, look at this thing," Park said, hefting the alien weapon. "It can punch through 6 inches of hardened steel, has a range of 2 kilometers, and fires pure energy. Probably costs more than my house back on New Sol." He set the rifle down carefully, then pulled out his own sidearm. A simple projectile weapon that looked ancient by comparison. But when that fancy gun's power cell dies, it's just expensive junk. This old girl? He patted his weapon affectionately. "Still works in vacuum underwater covered in mud, or after sitting in a cave for a week. Sometimes simple is better." Admiral Kale's shuttle touched down near the command post, its quantum engines humming with barely contained energy. The council leader emerged flanked by his senior staff, all of them staring at the battlefield with expressions of amazement and confusion. Kyle approached Colonel Han with something approaching reverence in his movements. The Admiral's multiple eyes took in the scene. Human soldiers casually standing among the wreckage of technology that had terrorized the galaxy for months. "Colonel," Kale began, his voice filled with genuine wonder, "how did you do this? Your weapons, your tactics, your entire approach, according to every military simulation we've run, none of this should have worked. The Vexcar shields can stop." "Anything in our arsenal," Han smiled, the expression creasing his weathered face in familiar lines. "Admiral, I think that's exactly the problem. You've been fighting them with everything in your arsenal. Same energy weapons, same tactical doctrines, same technological approaches they've seen from every species they've conquered," he gestured toward his soldiers, who were methodically cataloging captured equipment with the thoroughness of farmers inventorying their tools. "You see old men with outdated equipment. We see veterans who learned to win wars when losing meant watching your friends die and your home burn." Lee approached from the perimeter, carrying his sniper rifle with the casual familiarity of a craftsman with his favorite tool. In his other hand, he held a captured Vexcar energy weapon, its sleek design gleaming in the morning light. "Fancy gun," Lee said, then deliberately dropped the alien weapon onto the rocky ground where it clattered like expensive jewelry. "But it's useless when the battery dies, and it lights up every sensor in the galaxy when you fire it." He patted his rifle. with obvious affection. "This old thing? My grandfather carried it at the siege of New Busan during the colonial wars. My father used it against separatist forces on 3 different worlds. I've carried it through 6 major conflicts and probably 50 smaller ones. It's never let me down, never needed a power cell, never overheated in the middle of a firefight." Kim jogged up from the communications post, his face flushed with excitement. "Colonel, we're getting reports from across the sector. The Vexcar forces are pulling back everywhere. Their fleet commanders are demanding explanations from their ground forces, but nobody can figure out what happened here." Admiral Kyle watched as the humans continued their post-battle procedures with movements that were precise and economical, born from experience no training sim could provide. These weren't soldiers who'd adapted to galactic warfare. They were warriors who'd refused to abandon the hard-won lessons of human military history. The Council's been fighting this war with advanced technology against advanced technology, Han explained, watching his men secure the last of the enemy positions. Energy shields against energy weapons, quantum sensors against quantum countermeasures. But what happens when you use something completely different? He picked up a piece of debris from a destroyed Vexcar scanner. Their equipment is designed to detect energy signatures, quantum disturbances, electronic communications. It's incredibly sophisticated, probably the best sensor technology in the galaxy, but it can't track a man walking quietly through rocks, can't detect gunpowder burning, can't intercept hand signals. Kale's aide, the blue-skinned Zilonian, stared at the battlefield with obvious confusion. "But sir, kinetic weapons are so primitive. How could they penetrate advanced armor?" Park overheard and chuckled, flexing his prosthetic fingers. "Because their armor was designed to stop energy weapons. All that sophisticated protection, and they forgot to reinforce the joints where flexible materials meet rigid plates. A bullet doesn't care how advanced your shield generator is if it's aimed at your ankle." "Colonel Han," Kyle said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd just witnessed history being rewritten, "the Galactic Council would be deeply honored if you and your people would consider training our forces. We clearly have much to learn about warfare." Han looked out over the battlefield, where 200 humans had defeated 2,000 of the galaxy's most feared warriors. His soldiers were already breaking down their equipment with practiced efficiency, preparing to move to the next objective. "Admiral, here's what we learned in humanity's early wars," Han said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen combat on a dozen worlds. "War isn't about having the fanciest weapons or the newest technology. It's about understanding your enemy better than they understand you. It's about using what works, not what looks impressive. Most importantly, it's about remembering that experience beats innovation every single time." As the Council fleet regrouped in orbit and Vexcar forces retreated in confusion across multiple star systems, word of the battle spread throughout the galaxy. The humans hadn't just won a single engagement. They'd proven that sometimes the oldest methods were still the best methods. Within days, military academies across 100 worlds would be revising their curricula. The phrase human tactics would enter galactic military vocabulary as shorthand for unconventional warfare that achieved impossible victories through cunning rather than firepower. But for now, Colonel Han simply shouldered his grandfather's rifle and walked toward the extraction point, leaving behind a battlefield that would be studied for generations as the day the galaxy learned that primitive didn't mean powerless. The end.